Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music, and I am honored to be graced by the living legend, Mr. Dave Kushner. Welcome, brother.
Thanks, man. I don't know about living legend, but I'm here.
Dude, I mean, come on. Okay, let's Velvet Revolver, right then and there, incredible, playing with iconic musicians. Those records were super freaking cool. In Dave Navarro's solo band, that was super awesome. Stuff for Sons of Anarchy, you're just everywhere. And it's really, really cool. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it sounds more legendary when you say it that way.
Yeah, well, sometimes when you tie all the bits and pieces together, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did that.
So Rob School of Music is a music school. We focus on education, and I think it's just super fascinating to understand where people came from. So, was there a particular record or a concert or something in what part of your life you're like, that's what I want to do with my life?
I don't know if it happened that immediately. It wasn't like, oh, I saw Pete Townsend play on this show, and then I was like, oh, I want to do that. I know that for me, it happened very organically. It was, my mom had a classical guitar, nylon string in our house that she didn't play, and it was just sitting in the corner. And one day I picked it up and started messing around with it. I think I was maybe 14, and I tried to learn, Stairway to Heaven. It actually started I kind of it wasn't like, oh, this is awesome. It was like, I tried to learn Stairway to Heaven. It was too hard. I was like, oh, this sucks. And then I took a music class in school. I was in or junior high, and they're like, oh, you can't play with the pick, because I was trying to play with a pick, and they're like, you have to play with your fingers. It was a class. And I was like, this sucks too. And I put it down for, a year. And actually, yeah, the thing that got me started was punk rock. And there was this girl in this band called Mad Society, and she was a friend of mine, and she showed me how to play bar chords, and that was it. So yeah, I guess that was the event. It was like these simple songs. I was listening to punk rock, and I grew up on the classics like Sabbath and The Who and The Doors and Zeppelin and all that stuff. But really, when I learned, oh, I only have to learn these two shapes. I didn't even know the cowboy chords, like the D, the open G, that down that. I just knew this what this like a gorilla, oh, I know this shape and I know this shape, and I can move them around and play any song, and for me, that was kind of the gateway to playing and being able to do that, and it was huge for me. So yeah.
That's awesome. I think I don't know, when I'm teaching someone, I try and get to the why they want to learn. And if their goal is just to play songs, the way you went is the way to go, because it's instant gratification. I can do this, boom.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in LA, and there was this guitar. There's this little, it looked like a house, but it was right on Fairfax, right by where I went to high school, and Slash and I went to high school together. We actually went to junior high together and high school. And so I remember that we both took lessons at this place, and it was like this little room, and it like what you do, you go to this, I don't know how big your room is, but you go to this place, and you're like a teenager, and you're like, I want to learn how to play Purple Haze, and and then I left with I mean, it was the 80s, so I left with it, handwritten out, the notes and everything. And it's just like, oh yeah, so that's how we learned at first,
Yeah.
to play.
Yeah, it's not all that different now, man. It's the same thing. People come
Yeah.
in and show us a song, we're writing it out. It's all, in the moment, picking it out by ear sometimes. So yeah, it's badass. So you referenced Slash here, and we're definitely gonna get to that part. But from that genesis of picking up the instrument, getting into it, what was the next handful of chapters in your journey before, doing gigs and getting out there, and where
Um,
it led?
well, I got into punk rock. It was the 80s. It was when, Black Flag and Circle Jerks and that whole thing was happening in LA. Uh, so I got into doing all that, was learning guitar more and more. And then eventually I went to MI, Musicians Institute in LA
Mhm.
when it uh and then I really learned like where to put my fingers because I could it's almost like I could do this, but I didn't know where I was going. So I was just moving around and it was just like a bunch of noise. And then I finally was like, oh, okay. And then I started learning, all the stuff that you probably know, the theory and where to put my fingers and what I was doing, all that stuff. So that was great. And then I just started playing in bands, and then I got into this band called Wasted Youth, which was this punk band. And I think I was like 20, maybe. And that came like, let me turn the sound off on this thing. And then that came, and that was like the first time I made a record. And then they were like, "Oh, do you want to?" The old guitar, oh, because the guitar player left, and then he was coming back, and then they're like, "Do you want to play bass?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." But that was with the drummer from with Joey Castillo, who ended up being in Danzig and Queens of the Stone Age for a long time, and one of my best friends. And it was great because I played with him, and I really learned then like how to play with the drummer,
Mhm.
because I would play bass and I was like, okay, well, the bass player has to play with the drummer, and I would like watch the kick drum, and I would try and like have the notes play at the exact same time as the kick drum, like these kind of weird things I learned in school, kind of the mechanics of playing music too. So that was really helpful, with my rhythm stuff to focus on that. And then um and these are just the bands, but like in between there's always like the failed bands that you try and you play clubs and you try and you make demos and nothing happens. And so I had plenty of those too, but then I went right from the Love Hog from the Wasted Youth into this band called the Electric Love Hogs, that was already together. They fired a guy, I got in, they were just playing around LA. And that was a great time too, because like the bands we were playing with were, we play these small clubs like that could fit 100 people, and it was us and Tool and Rage Against the Machine and Stone Temple Pilots when they were Mighty Joe Young,
Wow.
and Sugar Ray when they were still called the Shrinky Dinks. And all these bands were Jane's Addiction. We were all playing these tiny clubs together, and everyone knew each other and everyone hung out. And it was a incredible time, for to be in a band. And so and then we got signed, and that was like my first major, record deal. And it was amazing. Tommy Lee uh was looking for a band to produce, and somehow someone put us in touch with Tommy. So he ended up producing 3 or 4 songs on the record. So we got to work with him, and it was killer. Like he took us under his wing, and he took us to like the NAMM show, like I remember him and Nikki Sixx, like, and took us to like all these places where they had endorsements, and they'd be like, "Hey, this is these guys, I'm producing these guys," like kind of took us under his wing. It
Wow.
was amazing. And so, yeah, that was, I forget the question, but hopefully that answered some of it.
Absolutely not, brother. I love it. I love it. Just go, man. It's so, I think it's so fascinating, and there's so much value to anyone who's watching this. Like, it's hard to understand the melting pot of what music was, particularly in LA in that, late 80s, early 90s period where it's just, you could have on the same bill a band like Rage and a band like Jane's and a band like Tool, and they're all like, they all, these are iconic bands, but they were just all out there on the scene doing it. So, it's amazing to have been part of that and made a record. And I didn't know the Tommy Lee, Nikki Sixx stuff. That's just another layer of awesome. So,
Yeah, it
very
was
cool.
pretty incredible. I mean, and to be honest, that's yeah, it's so I feel like the more I talk about it with guys like you, the more fortunate I feel that I was just put in that time. You know what I mean? Because it's like when I was going to MI, I was 18, right? And I should have been in 12th grade, but I wasn't a good student. So I made the deal with my mom to go to MI instead. And I was in MI and I had a buddy who was like, "Hey, we should go see this band, Jane's Addiction, at this bar." It was playing this bar. It was our second show ever. We
Wow.
go into this bar. They were amazing. They were Jane's Addiction. And I was in music school and I met Perkins, the drummer, and I was like, dude, I got to make this demo for music school. Like, will you play on it? And he's like, yeah, sure. And so, then I have this demo from 1984 of then Perkins came over and set up his drums in my living room. And it's funny now as a homeowner, and I'm sure it's like, and you have kids, like he didn't put down a rug. So he just had the bass drum with the two spikes. And on my living room floor, and there was like a gouge like as wide as my finger and probably like as big as a finger in
Uh,
the hardwood floor from the drums. And I was just like, oh fuck, that sucks, and my mom like freaked out. And I can't even imagine, dude, if one of my kids did that now to like my house and my floor, I'd be like, what do but it so the reason I tell that is because when the Love Hogs were making our record, Tommy was producing, and we also had this guy Mark Dodson who had done the suicidal record Lights Camera Revolution. And he at the time he was doing there was a studio, and one studio was us doing the Love Hogs record, and then this guy Mark Dodson was also doing the first Infectious Grooves record at the same studio.
wow.
I had introduced Robert Trujillo to Perkins, and that's how he ended up playing on the first record. And because we were all in the same complex, that's how I ended up playing on the first Infectious record. Doing this the solo and Punk It Up because they would just come. We were all in the same common area. Where the basketball court was. So there was like Mark was like, why don't you come and play solo on the song Punk It Up? And I was like, okay, cool. And then Mike and Robert did some backups on our record. And, everyone was just going back and forth. And it was like that, and so and that's how, I ended up being an Infectious for a little bit back then. And then, the thing I did earlier this year with Infectious Grooves, was Robert called me. I was like, of course, dude, that sounds awesome. So
It's magical. It just, I think, one of the overarching, what's the word I want? A lot of people say the same thing. Sorry, I can't find my articulation. Not enough
yeah,
coffee. Commonalities in all of the amazing musicians I've gotten to speak with is the secret sauce is being cool, being friendly, being open, being just a regular human being. And I think situations like that, like obviously talented, you're absurdly talented, but to be talented and just have a personality where you can get along with people and link people up, that's longevity in this business is being able to, the elusive hang. Can you hang? And
yeah. Don't be a
that,
boo.
yeah, exactly. And I think, it's super cool, to hear
Yeah.
stories like that. When Dave Navarro was putting together that solo band, was this the genesis of that relationship? Like knowing Perkins and then seeing James in the beginning, like how did that happen?
Um, I had known. It's weird. Like when there was a time where I was hanging out with, no, this a little later, there was a time where I became good friends with Navarro because me and when Navarro and Eric Avery had quit um Jane's and they had that band Deconstruction.
Yeah.
And me and Eric were hanging out, and Eric was taking private boxing lessons. And I had no money like all this time. Like I never really had money. I do a band like the Love Hogs, and then we tour, and then I'd quit, and then I'd go back to a day job, and then I'd get in another band. And it was always like no money, but kind of check to check. And Eric and I were super into boxing. Like we'd watch boxing matches all the time. We'd watch fights together, and And I was like, oh, I want to learn how to box. And Eric's like, well, I take these lessons, so I'll teach you what I'm learning every week, and that'll help me train and blah, blah, blah. So I took boxing lessons from Eric Avery.
Wow.
And then I was going to play in deconstruction as the second guitar player, but then that whole thing kind of died. And that's where I really became friends with Eric and Dave. And then years later, I was just hanging out with Dave, just organically. We just went through a period where we were like hanging out and eating, going to sushi a lot and whatever. And he he was doing this solo record, and he was like, I need to put together a band. Can you kind of like be the musical director and play, guitar in it? And so I helped him put together the band, and then we went on tour.
It's awesome. I so like quick tangent on myself. Like I was in sixth or seventh grade, and Dave Navarro was in the Chili Peppers and Aeroplane music videos on MTV, and I'm like, I was so young, I didn't realize like that Jane Says was that guy, and then he's in this band, blah blah blah. But I was like, look at this guy with nail polish and long hair and eyeliner and tattoos and nipple rings. That's a rock star. That was my like, I want to do this moment. So
Right.
it's the degree of separation that I love that solo album that he did, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was a cool time.
So let's move forward now to Velvet Revolver. So you knew Slash, I guess, from middle school or junior high and high school. I mean, that I remember the rumblings of when that band was coming together, and I love Scott Weiland as a vocalist. I love those two records; they are timeless. Still to this day, I really, really enjoy those songs. What was that whole process like? Like all of it, anything, any story you can tell on that.
um, yeah, I mean, the way it happened for me was uh it's funny. I was in this band, this like side project band. I was in Japan. I met Duff there because he had Loaded, that side project band, and that band was playing with us, and we were the only two not drinking. And I had already been in Japan for a little bit, and I'd found these like non-alcoholic Japanese beers, and I was like, dude, check this out. I found these. And he's like, oh, it's awesome. So we just like drank these non-alcoholic beers and talked all night and became friends. And we became friends, um, very non-musical friends. It was like we would just hang out in LA, and he'd be like, dude, I read this book called Black Hawk Down, and they made it into a movie. We got to go see this movie. And then we'd go see, Black Hawk Down in the theater. And, like that was kind of our relationship. And then I had started recording. I had seen, the singer from Fitz and the Tantrums, Mikey Fitz.
Mhm.
So Mikey Fitz, I saw like around town. I'd seen his band at the Viper Room, and I was writing all these songs on computer and just like my own stuff. And I asked Mikey Fitz, like, because he wasn't in Fitz and the Tantrums, he was just like a local guy. And I said, hey, dude, I got these songs. You want to sing on them? So he sang on them, and it sounded pretty good. And then at one point, Duff heard them, and Duff's like, oh, dude, let's start a band, And I was like, oh, let's get Joey C, play drums. It'd be me, you, Joey C, and Mikey Fitz. And we started recording, dude. And right then, uh, I remember being in a diner with Duff, this diner called Swingers, which is right around the corner from where Matt lived. And Matt came in.
Iconic diary. Yeah.
Yeah. And Matt came in and said, oh, Randy Castillo passed away. We're going to do this benefit for him. Do you want to do it? Not to me, to Duff.
Right.
And Duff was like, oh, okay, cool. And, and I was at that benefit, and so they played with, Duff, Slash, and Matt, and Josh and Keith from Buck Cherry. And then that was like the band. And then they had, special guests and whatever. And so they did this thing, and we were recording at Rumbo around the same time. And then Duff called me. I remember and we finished recording, but we hadn't like mixed it and whatever. And I remember Duff calling and saying, dude, I don't want you to get bummed out, but I'm playing with Duff, Slash, and Matt, and it felt pretty good. And, I think we're going to try and like see what this comes, what comes of this thing with Josh and Keith, and I was so bummed. And I'm like, oh, dude. And but he's like, dude, you never know what's gonna happen. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And I would talk to him all the time, and then he would say like, oh, and then after a month or so, I guess they weren't stoked on Josh's vocals, or it just wasn't, right for what they had in mind or what they wanted to do. So they kind of parted ways with Josh, and then Keith was still there, and then and then Duff called, and he's like, dude, I don't know, it's weird because Keith was, they were like the Mick and Keith of Buck Cherry, and now it's kind of awkward, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And then he, then they parted with Keith all of a sudden, and I remember because Duff had said, dude, learn these songs because I think we're gonna get rid of Keith. It's just not working out. It doesn't feel right, whatever. And so I said, okay. He's like, learn these songs because I'm gonna have you come down next week. And I was like, oh, okay, shit. And then the next day, he's like, Keith's out. You got to come down tomorrow. I was like, what? Oh, dear. Okay. And so I went down and I had my pedal board because I always had like a bunch of pedals and make my little weird sounds or whatever. And I went down and I set my pedal board up and we played. And then they were like, all right, well, all right, cool. And I was like, I was going to pick up my pedal board and, pack up my stuff. And they're like, no, just leave it and come back tomorrow. And I was like, oh, what? Okay. And dude, I swear to God, like the next 6 months were just like that. Like I didn't know if I was in the band or
Wow.
what was going on. And it was just like, yeah, come back tomorrow. And then it was like, all right, come back tomorrow. And then every day we would go to Mates in LA, the rehearsal studio, 5 days a week from 2 to 6 every day and just write songs and look for a singer. And for 10 months we did that. So yeah, and I didn't want to lose my spot. I didn't even know for sure if I was in the band, but no one else was coming in and I was there. So
Right.
and I was going through the process with these guys, and I didn't want to lose my spot, so I got a job at the rehearsal studio. Bobby, the owner, was like, I was like, dude, I gotta make some money, and because we didn't have a record deal or anything, we were just hoping that it would turn into something. And Duff and Slash were fronting the money for the rehearsal studio, and so I worked there, and I'd get there like early, and I'd work and I'd hump gear. I'd be, like doing cartage, moving like all these other, like I did Queens of the Stone Age, and I'd see Joey and I'd be like, oh, what's up, dude? Like it was very humbling, a lot of guys that I had played with, in the past, and I was like moving their band's gear, or, like putting it on a truck. But, I did it, and I'd be there from 9 till 2 working, and then rehearse 2 to 6. There's this documentary on YouTube, or it came out on VH1 called The Making of Velvet Revolver, I think, Inside Out. But you could see like in the first scene, like I'm wearing work boots and pants with paint all over them because I was actually painting
Wow.
the storage unit, across the street, and I would just still be there in my work clothes basically. So,
Amazing. I mean, it all worked out. What was
yeah.
what was it like writing those songs? Like, do you have any specific memories of, how something came together?
I mean, it was weird because like by the time Scott got in the band, we had 60 songs
Wow.
that we had written. There was this massive whiteboard, and we would come up with these goofy names and because there were so many songs, we would just name it like the Emperor's, crown, or the Emperor's green crown, or whatever, like all these goofy names. And because we didn't have a singer, so we didn't have anyone writing lyrics, so we didn't have any, like the songs were just pieces of music. It was like, you know, the passenger, or the this, or Pusher Jones, or with all these goofy names. And I do remember, and I think I said it on Instagram. I started doing these little tutorials um, of the how to play the songs, on contraband. And I do remember Slither like being the for some reason the one song that we worked on the most. Because we'd like work on a song for maybe a few days, then we record it, and then it would just go on the board, and then we'd have a recording of it if we ever wanted to go back to it. Slither was the one song that we worked on the most during that 10 months. Like we do it, and then for some reason we'd go back to it like 2 months later and say like, oh, let's, and it like the middle section was twice as long, or there wasn't a middle section, or we took that out. It was always the same riff and everything, but we would go like, oh, maybe this is the verse, and maybe. And then the other specific thing I can remember is I remember when Matt came in with the riff for Set Me Free. And I remember he was, you know, it was so funny. Like there's a little couch in there. We're all sitting on the couch, kind of like this. And he's like, and I think he would get kind of nervous, so he would be extra like gregarious. He'd be like, hey, guy, you're like, oh, I got this thing. Check it out. Check it out. And he put the bass on, and he was he was like standing over us. It felt like, because we were all kind of like this, and he was just like, oh, like, all right, check this out, and he was like, he was watching his hand, and he was like real intent, like, and he was playing like, and we were like, oh, that's cool. And that was how I remember specifically that was the main riff for Set Me Free, which became, our first song that ever came out. Um, so yeah, that as far as the writing, and we'd all bring in different stuff. And, I remember Slash bringing in the Slither riff. I remember him doing the intro thing for, Fall to Pieces. But there was honestly, I remember when Scott came in and we first were like, okay, he's in the band and we're going to do this. I remember we gave him like all 60 pieces of music on CDs
Wow.
because it was 1990, or it was 2002. So the MP3 and that technology it wasn't as simple as it is now,
Yeah.
where it's just like you could listen on your phone, or you'd go off your computer. And I remember, so everything was CDs, and so we gave him 60 songs on a few different CDs. And because the first song we ever gave him was Set Me Free, and we got back exactly pretty much how it sounds on the record.
Wow.
And I remember we were like, holy shit, this is the guy. Like, it's undeniable. It's like, we know he's got all these issues and problems, but he's a complete package. Obviously he's fucking Scott Weiland, and now we hear this song that we wrote that he put vocals on that's awesome. Like, we were like, let's buckle up, like, I
Yeah.
guess we're doing this. And I'll never forget that we gave him all these songs, and dude, and then he's like, all right, I recorded 3 more songs, because our things were pretty good quality. So he would just put vocals on them. And he's like, oh, I put vocals on 3 more songs. And I remember me and Duff were in Seattle. We were going snowboarding. And I remember driving on this road to whatever mountain we were driving to snowboard. And he put the CD in. He's like, dude, I got the CD. And I hadn't listened to it yet. And it was Slither, Fall to Pieces, and Big Machine.
Wow.
And we were like, wow. Like, I mean, dude, like our first 2 singles were on that, in those first 3 demos. And we were like, holy crap. Like, this could really, like, this is happening. Like, it was so crazy to, those are like the big moments, it's like there was other big moments that were really big, like the Clive Davis, you're going to have a #1 record, those calls. Like, I remember those, but those kind of a little more insulated, it's like you got a kid, it's like those moments you have where your kid does something and you're just like,
Yeah.
and it's really like the weight of the emotional weight in a positive way, just like lays on top of you, and you're just like, wow, this is crazy, and so that was yeah, that was another thing I remember about the songwriting process and all that stuff.
Dude, I mean, thank you for that. To hear the perspective from someone who was in it, because like as a fan of music, at the time, I remember when Set Me Free came out on the Hulk soundtrack, and
Yeah,
like the hype was there for this super group, and like as a fan, it was like, holy shit, this is gonna work. And then when Slither came out as the lead single for the record, it was like, oh my god, it's gonna like what? I can't wait to get my hands on this. So it's
yeah.
I I try not to overuse the word iconic, and sometimes I may, but I mean it every time I say it. That record, I mean, 20 years later, it's fucking solid. Great,
Yeah.
great songs. I want to ask a question about that experience from a different perspective. And this is like,
Hmm.
being that we're a school, something that a lot of our musicians here go through, because they're earlier in their musical journey. Not, if they're
Sure.
50 or 20 or 10, they're newer to the instrument. And we try and put all of our musicians into bands and get them playing various events and town things and actual club gigs and
Yeah,
stuff
it's
like
great.
that. Thank you. And stage fright is a huge thing. And, you've been doing this, you just listed a resume that would knock the face off most. What comes with that is giant stages and tons of pressure. What are some tips you would give to someone who's worried about those type of things?
It's weird, man. Like, I got to be honest, I've never suffered from a lot of stage fright or any of that stuff.
Okay.
I never really get that nervous, and I don't know why that is. So I can't totally say like, oh, I get super nervous and then I throw up in a bucket and then I go and then this is what I do to remedy that, because like I remember Slash would get super nervous like every time. Like, and he would tell me, I'd be like, dude, you nervous? He'd be like, yeah, I'm fucking nervous. Like, aren't you? And I'd be like, oh, not really. And I don't, although I get more nervous when it's an intimate setting.
Uh,
It's what's crazy is when it's the big stages, I get more in my head because you're so far separated from the crowd that you feel more on display, and I would get more self-conscious of how I was standing. I'd be like, oh wait, I can't. Which I'd stand like, and, and I'd have to I mean, it sounds silly, but so yeah, I mean, I guess I had my versions of stage fright or being self-conscious. Um and yes, in the intimate situations, you know, I get a little nervous, but a couple of things there's a couple of things I remember that really I think really helped me is I remember this one time I was fighting with everyone in the band and I hated everyone and I was just like, ah, these fucking assholes and that fucking guy, but and which happens. And I remember the guy who was the best man at my wedding is the bass player in Weezer, Scott Schreiner. Was my best friend, and I remember talking to him and I was like, oh, these fucking assholes. We were in Italy and we are playing this festival and I was just going off on like everyone. And he said, dude, I'm like, I don't even want to go on stage with these, guys. And he's like, listen, you, it really is about when I go on stage or when you're newer and you're going on stage, all you're thinking about is how you're going to do and if you're going to make a mistake and blah, blah, blah. And what the biggest thing that's helped me is being of service to the people in the audience. Because if I think about you, Rob, I'm not thinking about myself. If I think, how can I help Rob today? I'm not thinking about what am I going to get? What am I going to get from, talking to you today? But it's like, what am I going to give? I'm going to give some people that want, some insight into me or my life or my journey or whatever. Like, look, everyone had their first day playing guitar. Everyone has been a student at some point. Everyone, wants what I've accomplished in a sense. If you're a guitar player, or a musician, or whatever. But the biggest thing for me is being of service to the people that are there, because what Scott said to me was, dude, you got to go out there and you got to play for those people, because there's people out there that have been, you know, been looking forward to this for months, that saved up money to buy a ticket, that waited in line, that got babysitters, that got, did all these things to arrange this night to see you guys play, to forget about all the bullshit.
Mm.
They forget about the taxes and the baby and the this and the stress and the everything that's going on in their lives. They just want entertainment. They want to be taken away for a ride, and that's my job. And he said, that's your job, dude. Now go out there. And that's where you think about that. Think about how you can do that for those people, that bought those tickets and enjoy what you guys do. And that to me was the biggest piece of it, of like concise advice that I can tell people, that I think about when I'm nervous. And then I'm like, what can I do for the person that's watching?
I
Because
love
I'm here to, you know, show you or do something. And sometimes it's like, if you're a younger player, you're just worried about fucking up. Yeah. Just like looking at your fingers, you're like, oh my God, what happens when I get to the, uh, and I sometimes I just have to, breathing helps too. I know it sounds trite, but just, you know, I've tried playing golf, and I'm not great, and then I play poorly, and it's like when I just take a second and breathe and you know think about entertaining people or whatever, that's the most helpful thing I can think of.
I love that. That's incredible. And it's true, like the beginners, they're just so worried about that one chord. But there's beauty sometimes in that simplicity. I just did something this past weekend with a girl who had performed on The Voice. She went pretty far on The Voice. And we met randomly, and then we kind of just like threw something together super quickly, and she wanted to do an original song, and we didn't know the song, and it had three chords. And it was perfect in its simplicity, because she's not really a guitar player. She's a singer. She's learning how to be a guitar player. And I
Yeah,
was like looking to see if there was nerves as she was doing it, but it wasn't, because she knew her three chords and she had the confidence and she owned the room, and it was a beautiful thing. But
yeah.
absolutely, man. I don't want to eat up your whole day, so I'm going to jump to the rapid fire question, because my next question would have been, what advice would you give someone starting off? But I think you sort of answered that in this question in a really eloquent way.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I will
Yeah,
say this.
please.
You know, the other things I've learned is, look, I've gone on this, my musical career was not like Guns N' Roses, or, like I wasn't the guy that got in a band and when I was 19 and then the band was massive. It was like, it was like this, and you get a little thing, and then you get a little thing, and then you go back to work, and then you get a little thing, and then you get back to, you get a little higher, and you go back to work, and whatever it is. And the the nuggets that I've gotten and acquired along the way is, it's kind of it's all about a mindset of service. You know what I mean? Like it really is that. How am I going to help the band? How am I going to help these guys, you know, get to the finish line? What am I doing? Am I trying to get something, or am I trying to give something, in the band? Am I just sitting there kind of not saying anything and making people uncomfortable because I'm not talking? Or can I ask, what can I think about? What questions can I ask? Oh yeah, his kid is, starting preschool tomorrow. Like, hey, what's going on with Grace? How's your kid doing? And it's like that mindset is so valuable, I found for, and I'm not saying it like I learned it from, Tony Robbins or which he's fine, but it's not like, oh, the mindset of it, I've said mindset, but it's just like a way of being, like it's just how I live my life and but what can I do for others is really so so valuable, and with, if you're just starting out, it's also like, look, I have to remember too that I play music because I love playing music. It's like the gravy is that I've gotten to make a living at it. But look, at the end of the day, if I didn't get to make a living at it, I'd still be an old man sitting on my porch, if I had a porch, playing acoustic guitar and, or coming up. It's like I still geek out on watching like old, Gary Moore shredding videos. And it's like, I love all that stuff. It's like I'm still a guitar player. I still watch people shred. The other day, I went to Slash's blues thing at the Greek Theater. I took my son, and Eric Gales was playing first. And I'm like, come on, we got to get there early, dude. Fucking Eric Gales is the shit, and he's unbelievable, dude. He's just like, I could watch that guy all day long. And it's like, but that's, I'm the grown man, rushing down to get to the Greek, driving a little faster than I should so I can get there to see Eric Gales, melt some faces and, in the front. And, I mean, that's it. You got to stay passionate. You got to remember, look, it's hard. It takes a lot of work and it's a lot of practice and it's worth it. But it's like, you just got to do it because you love doing it. I remembered the one thing I will tell you too is like, I remember, like, I was showing my son how to play guitar a couple years back. And I remember thinking like, oh, just do this, and I'm like, wait, I've been doing this my whole life. Like, it's not that easy. And I turned the guitar upside down
Yes.
and tried to play left-handed. And I was like, this is like impossible. Like, I can't even fret a chord, a D chord. Like, I can't, and I tried to strum with my left hand instead of my right. And I was like, the most basic thing was impossible for me. Not impossible, but was just as hard when I was learning. And it really helped me, remember like, oh shit, this is what all these students are going through. This is what all these people beginning are going through. It's not just like I picked it up and I was like, oh yeah, it's easy and blah, shred and whoa, that's easy. I don't know why you can't play chord.
Right.
It was like that again. So it was a good reminder for me to uh to go back to, a beginner kind of way of thinking.
Yeah, I do the flip upside down thing all the time when I'm trying
Oh, really?
to, just because it's humbling. Like, so like
Yeah.
you play drums, like you hit the drum, you get a sound. You play piano, you press the keys, you get a sound. Guitar, you have to do very different things with each of your hands. And I think like movies and media and like everyone can pick up the guitar and strum around the campfire. It's not an easy instrument to do well. I mean,
Yeah.
to even do mediocrely, it's not an easy instrument. So yeah, that's
It's so true, dude. You can like just make a note with a
right.
piano and it's like you could hit it with your elbow, but with guitar, it's like it takes you weeks to just make a simple chord sound good,
Right.
because where you put your finger on the fret and how close it is to the fret or how far away, and
Yeah.
you're hitting the other strings or you're accidentally muting your strings because it's crazy.
Yeah. I love what you said about being of service. I think that, me personally with this YouTube channel and this school, like that is my entire philosophy is what can I do to help others, find their way musically. And I'm so appreciative to have people like you, giving your time to just kind of just pay it forward and show people, the ropes and the ins and the outs and maybe help someone avoid, one of the mistakes we've all made along the way. So awesome
Yeah.
stuff, man. Awesome stuff. You ready to have some fun and feel uncomfortable with some
Yes.
difficult questions?
Yes.
Right on. Let me
Do
put
it.
on. My game show voice. All right, what we're about to do is Rob's School of Music rapid fire questions. It's a series of this or that questions where the answer to all of them is yes and both, but that's not the answer you're allowed to give. Ready?
Yes.
Humbucker or single coil?
Humbucker.
Okay. Les Paul style guitar or Strat style guitar?
Uh, lately it's been Les Paul's.
Okay. If you were to grab a Fender style guitar, would be a Strat or a Tele?
Strat for sure.
Okay. On that
Charvel.
Strat,
Charvel Strat.
I like that. There we go. Super Strat. Okay.
Yeah,
Extra
yeah,
layers. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. LA guy from the 80s, of course.
yeah.
So then the
Yeah.
next question is going to be you want a tremolo on that, of course. So we'll skip
Yeah, Floyd Rose, dude, of course.
that. 22 or 24 frets.
22. 24 is too many.
Yeah.
You get
It pushes
lost.
back the neck pickup gets shoved back a bit, and I don't like the way that I don't know my ear aesthetically maybe I'm not sure. When you're for your guitar pick, a thin, medium, or thick guitar pick.
I've been going with I think I use a Dunlop 88 or the 1.0s.
Okay, very cool. For your strings, nines, tens, or 11s.
As I've gotten older, I've gone thinner. When I was in Velvet Revolver, I was playing 11s and 12s,
Wow.
and because I was doing mostly rhythm.
Hmm.
But now that I'm, like infectious, I was doing more solos, so I was doing nines and tens. So
There's nothing wrong with that. They all work. If you were to grab a bass for a session, or we didn't even get to your film work and things like that, but would you grab a P bass or a jazz bass?
P bass.
Okay. Rosewood or maple fretboard on your guitars,
Oh,
or ebony, if you had to pick one forever. If it's a Les Paul, it's going to be a darker wood. I get that, but
yeah.
okay.
I would say probably the darker rosewood.
Okay. For an acoustic, would it be a more traditional, like a Martin or a Gibson, or something a little more modern, like a Taylor?
I don't like Taylors. I
Okay.
got to be honest. Like I really like I have a J45 right there.
Yes. Beautiful.
I think my
Beautiful.
camera's all blurry now, but
I know. I get it.
J45. Yeah. I don't really the Taylors. They just sound too thin to me, and I like the warmth of the older acoustics.
I could not agree more. I have a J45 as well, and I love it. For
Yeah.
pick it up, it sounds good. Plug it in, it's not the whole deal. Okay, when you're rocking with an amp, would you prefer the distortion come from within the amplifier, or like a twin and putting a pedal in front of it?
Definitely the amplifier.
Okay. For your tubes, 6L6, EL34, or any of the variations?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't even know what's in there.
So
Like I
Marshalls are
think
probably
there's
the EL ones, and like a Mesa
yeah.
6L6s or Fender.
Yeah, I don't know. I've tried different ones, and it's like I had this Friedman head recently, and I think it had EL34s, but
Nice.
I didn't like it, so I like this Marshall right here.
Yes.
It's a
Beautiful.
JCM 2000, but it's got like a Friedman knob, an extra knob that Jay
Mod.
Friedman put on there. I don't know what it
Nice.
does, but it sounds better.
Awesome. Jealous. Okay, so this is a polarizing question just based on where people are with amps these days. Do you like something like in the 100-watt range, or do you like those lower wattage amps, the 25 watt, the 50 watts? I guess it depends on the gig.
Yeah, it really depends on the gig. I've only, I mean, I have this there. You can't see it. There's a Friedman. I have the Friedman combo. It's like a 20 watt. It's basically like the BE head, but in a 20 watt combo.
Cool.
I think that when you get into those higher wattages, it's just too much for me. I like a more contained sound, like a 50 or 100. Like this, I don't know if you can see it. There's this Mesa 212 right here, and this Marshall head, dude. This was my rig for the whole Libertad tour.
Wow.
Just this, like that. I had a bunch of these cabinets, but they weren't plugged in, and I had these combos that sat on top. I liked like 212, a 212, and a combo on top, and doubled, and I thought it looked really cool. But literally, this cabinet one 212 and the Marshall head were the only thing
Wow.
going, and it sounded killer to me. Oh, and this 345.
I saw you
That's
guys.
my whole rig, dude. Right there.
Awesome. So I saw you guys on that tour at the PNC Bank Arts Center in Homedale, New Jersey. It was a very good show.
Oh yeah, totally, dude. I had a bunch of my wife's family was there. It's like because she's from Jersey, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember that gig for sure.
It was fun. It was hot that day, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I don't want to fall down the rabbit hole, so as briefly as possible, this is not one of the rapid fires, but I didn't get to it before. What are your thoughts on digital stuff? Reason I ask, so I Richard Fortis, I talked to him, and I
Yeah.
asked, because it was like when Guns was on the tour had just started, the second or third leg of it. Kemper, Fractal, you into that world? Or are you a tube amp guy through and through?
Yeah, no, I'm very I have a Kemper right here
Okay.
and a Fender Tone Master Pro.
Yes.
I've been using the Kemper for years because as a composer, I think definitely, like once, I mean, dude, when I started composing, it was like I've only ever had, I don't have like this room isn't set up for really for like live recording. There's no drum room, it's just this one room, and with I found with composing you have to go very quickly, and you like okay, for instance, I did the show F is for Family, which was Bill Burr's animated show on Netflix. And it was in the 70s, and there was a ton of music in there. Like, they're like, oh, we want a song that sounds like the Allman Brothers right here. We want a song that sounds like Fleetwood Mac in the background of this guy's, house party or whatever. And I, if I didn't have, I couldn't do that with amps. I didn't, I mean, what am I going to buy like an Ace? I mean, I have a few amps here, but it's like, I'm not going to sit there and mic and it's like, I got to do 20 pieces, 20 pieces of music, by the end of the week and plugging in amps and playing and then listening back to it. And it's just like with the Kemper, it's just, you just plug it in and dial up like, something and it sounds great, and Mike Schultz at Fender gave me this Tone Master Pro recently when they came out, and I've been messing around with that thing a lot. It sounds amazing, and I actually used it on a show with Infectious, live and use it at rehearsal, and it sounds amazing. So I'm all about stuff if it if it sounds good.
Right.
If I can listen to it and it's easier, if this is easier than that, but it still sounds good, then I'll go with that.
Totally. Perfect answer. All right. Let me just a handful more of the rapid fires, and then thank you so much again for your time. Effects related things. If you had to pick, would it be delay or reverb?
Delay,
Okay. Phaser or chorus?
of course.
A wah pedal or a whammy pedal?
Wah pedal, for sure.
And now the worst part of all, bands. The Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles, for sure.
Okay. If it's the Beatles, is it John or is it Paul?
Paul,
Okay. I'm agreeing with you so far beautifully. Bowie or Dylan?
ooh, Bowie,
Cool. Zeppelin or Floyd?
Zeppelin.
Okay. If we were talking Pink Floyd, would it be Dark Side or The Wall?
Uh, I think Dark Side,
Okay. Pearl Jam or Nirvana?
definitely Nirvana.
Okay. And lastly, Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth?
Ooh, David Lee Roth.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome, dude. Thank you so much for your time, man. These stories have been like, I have chills from just hearing this stuff. Thank you for sharing and just the energy. And I just appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And I just wanted to like real quick plug,
Yes,
a quick plug.
please.
But like I just want to. I know we didn't get into the composing stuff and whatever, but
We
you know,
can. I mean, I have time. I mean,
well,
can.
I was just saying, like, I've been talking with, Marty Schwartz,
Mhm.
of course. So I've been talking to him a lot lately, and I had been planning to do this kind of masterclass thing on playing, like a chapter on chords, a chapter on this, a chapter on that, but also like kind of making the transition into composing.
Nice.
because when I started composing, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't go to school for that. I didn't know what a cue meant or a, time code or spotting session or any of the terminology. I didn't really know. I could write a theme song, but that's like writing a short song.
Hmm.
That's not scoring a scene. That's not making, writing music to make someone feel something emotionally, specifically, and working with a director and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of putting together that whole thing now, and that'll it'll be later in the year, you know. But right now, yeah, I'm just doing it's I've been having a lot of fun. Like I'm on Instagram, like going through these songs, and actually, yeah, I think they're talking about putting out a new 20-year anniversary version of Contraband. I think that's gonna I think I'll find out tomorrow.
Ooh,
But they're with some extra songs and stuff. But
yes.
yeah, so and that was totally coincidental for me, like starting to go through the song. And it's just been fun, It's like it's fun to drive around and try and remember my parts, and just show people how to play them. And you
Dude,
know
I think having access to the guy who wrote and played the songs to show you how to play the songs is one of the coolest things of being alive and a musician at this time. I mean, I saw your Slither thing and I was like, oh my God. And then I saw like I did a 20th anniversary of one of my old bands, and we just live streamed it. And one of the songs we did was Slither, and I saw you liked it. I was like, oh my God, I was probably playing it wrong, and now he knows, and he's gonna yell at me. But like, I love stuff like that, man. And the composition part, like when that all comes to be, like I would love to jump on and do this again and just have a whole
yeah,
conversation about that, because I think that a lot of people, a lot of parents, like the people who send their kids to me, they're like, well, they're not going to be a rock star. But there's so many ways to make money through music, and I think film and TV and composing
yeah,
is such an incredible world. I mean, try and watch a horror movie and mute it and tell me if you feel anything. You don't. It's the music that's making you feel the jump scare. It's all built into what your ears are doing, so much more than your eyes. So I love
yeah,
that, dude. Yeah, I can't wait.
yeah. And it's a big and there was a lot to learn. And luckily my best friend at the time, was had done it before me, so but all of a sudden I was doing this TV show, and I was like, and he was like, you don't even know what the we get in these fights, like you don't even know what a cue is. I'm like, I know what a cue is, and really I didn't. And I was just like,
Fake it till you make it.
just all these dumb things that you don't know because you don't know.
Right.
Like, like if you can't figure out how to end a song on a record, you fade it. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like if you can't, and I remember like we were doing this cop show called Detroit 187 that was on ABC. That was like my first gig doing score, and I remember like there was a couple of cues, which are the little mini pieces of music, for a scene,
Mhm.
the beginning and the end. Like the song, the music in the middle is just called a cue, CUE. And
Mhm.
so I was like, oh, okay. And then I would like fade it out, like I would write it and then I would mix it, and for the scene, and I just faded it at the end. He's like, dude, you can't fade out a cue. If you have to end it, you have to either end it with like a note, or you got to put something on there to specifically end it. You can't just fade it out. And I was like, oh, okay. Like all these little things that, I didn't know, like how to, watch a spotting session with a director, and, to keep track of the time code, and like, oh, okay, write that down, and the scene, the music, he wants the music to start at, 34:29, and it ends here. And, then when you get the thing, you take all these notes, and you're like, all this stuff, like, was just so overwhelming to me because I didn't know how to do it. It's like buying a house. Like I'm sure you buy your first house and you don't understand the terminology,
Right.
and you're like, what does that mean? What do you mean contingency? What is that? Like, are they trying to screw me?
Right. Oh, totally, dude.
Oh,
Like, I'm friends with this guy Carl Burnett, and he did sync work for Storage Wars and
oh yeah.
Pawn Stars and those shows and similar things. He was telling me some of these words, and I was like, I just play guitar. I don't know what you're talking about. So
Yeah. But
fascinating.
yes, there's to say that, to your to any of your students that are watching, like there's or the parents, there's so many different ways to, you know, make a living. Not to say like, oh, you should be a musician, like you should play music because you want to play music,
Right.
without and if you get to make, like I said, if you get to make a living, that's the gravy, But yes, there is a lot of different ways. There's those library, there's the what do you call it? The reality show, like they usually use a bunch of library music where like your buddy or there's I've written theme songs for, you know, reality shows, and I've written theme songs for regular shows. I just did a thing with Fox Sports where I wrote these specific like 1.5 pieces of music where they were like, oh, we want something like this, but it was generic in the sense that, you split it up and you make stems and then they can, kind of put it together or take stuff out if they want or whatever, but it just lives in their library.
Yeah.
So, and that stuff, has paid me on the back end, with there's that term mailbox money, where you just do it and you get paid for it. And then you go along with your life. And then all of a sudden you get this little nice surprise mailbox of, now it's on your phone, like direct deposit. But it used to be in the mailbox where you get a check and you're like, oh, what? 3 grand for those things I wrote, or, 6 grand, or, and there's songs for, commercials. I've done that stuff too. I did a Mountain Dew commercial. There's like so many there's writing original songs. And then even if you're an unknown artist, getting those placed in indie movies, as like there really is so many different ways that you can, find to make money, playing music. And I mean, it's a little I get a little nervous because of AI, and I figure like they're going to definitely take some of the lower, less important songs. And it's like, oh, we need an inspirational rock 30-second track for this, healthcare commercial. Be easier to just do it with AI than have someone write it.
Hate that. But yeah, it's there. It's so close. It's happening, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I remember I was at. Oh, now you got me triggered here. I was at the NAM show, 2020, right before the world went funky, and I
Yeah.
was listening to a seminar with this guy BT and a couple other
Oh
Morgan,
yeah.
and they were talking about using AI as like to write music with it. Like you could have it generate you a bass line. And it was like,
Yeah.
this is before like Chat GPT and everything was out there. And it was like, the panel was saying it from an excited standpoint, but everyone in the room was like, holy fuck, I don't like this. And
Yeah.
now like BT is doing a tremendous amount of work to like preserve the rights of the musicians and using it as a tool, but not take jobs away. And it's pretty noble the quest he's on, but it's scary, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. But it makes you, I mean, look, dude, if you're, I think, I feel like if you're a musician, and you've made a living or you're trying to make a living, it's like you have to be resourceful,
Yes.
that because you're an artist. I mean, any artist, whether it's painting, whether it's, acting, whether it's music, it's like you have to be resourceful because it's not steady unless you're in Guns N' Roses or you get that gig that just, then you become Ryan Gosling and it's, I don't know, but who knows? Like that guy, I'm sure gets mega stressed out just like any of us,
Yeah.
over different level of things. So, but I'm just saying, like, if you're working, and it's like as you get older or whatever, you always have to, you can't just sit on the one thing. It's like a moving target. Like you with the, it's like first you're a touring guy or you're playing in bands, and then it's like you're teaching, and then you're doing this, and you got a school, and then you're expanding with the podcast. It's like you can't coast uphill.
I
You know
love
what I
that.
mean?
Yes.
And so you got to Same with AI. Oh, this thing's coming, this threat's coming to my, part of my income. So now I got to figure out how to subsidize that. What else can I do?
Yeah.
So it's just part of the, musician's journey, or the artist way,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, dude, it's not a straight line, but it would be boring if it was.
Uh,
Just ride the wave.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, dude. But
Wow.
then again, you get to still wear, you know, it's like when I go to pick up my kids from school. Like my kids go to this private school, and I'm showing up with, Vans on and a t-shirt with skull and crossbones on it or whatever, and I got tattoos, and I'm like, don't feel like the adult in the
Oh
room,
my God,
you
that's
know.
amazing. Dude,
But you know how it is. It's like you're adult on paper because you
right.
got a kid, you got a house, you got a thing, you pay a life insurance and blah, you got a car and a mortgage and blah. But then you still show up and you're like, dude, I will show up literally to pick up my kids, and it's like I'm cranking Slayer because it came on Sirius
Yes.
XM, and I'm
Yes.
like, South of Heaven, and I'm like, it's just blaring, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm pulling up to the school, I'm like, oh, I gotta turn it down, and or something will come on where I'm just like, what? Oh,
You
you
gotta.
know,
There's no other way to listen to that music. I'll see like moms come in here with like their 5-year-old daughter and like a sundress for piano lessons, and I walk to greet them, and it's like it's Rob's School of Music. I'm Rob, so like I have to
yeah,
talk to them, and I'm like fully sleeved out, and they're like, I'm like, no, no, it's okay,
yeah,
cool, don't worry, I'm okay. Stranger
yeah,
danger. It's amazing.
yeah. It's pretty funny.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely incredible. I will link up everything that we've discussed down below, and I can't wait to talk to you again in the future. Thank you.
Man, I'm excited to do it.